had Robbie Alts on commitment watch for some time, and then yesterday afternoon, boom, it happened. Alabama gets the 6'4", 240-pound tight end from Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Yeah, that's right. They finally made that decision, and something that we've kind of expected for a long time, and never really sure why he was waiting. I guess just make sure he wanted to make the right decision. It was down to top two of Alabama and Virginia Tech, and it had really been top two for the last 2 or 3 months. And he visited Alabama back in, I think it was either late May or early June. Kind of for one of those unofficial visits in terms of he was able to visit the campus, but wasn't able to meet with the coaching staff or go inside the facilities or anything like that, because of the recruiting dead period. But he did see the campus and and all the surroundings. But had visited Virginia Tech 3 or 4 times. Had met with the coaching staff there, and I think that's what really piqued his interest in Virginia Tech. But at the end of the day, it felt like Alabama was the best spot for him, and we always felt pretty confident in predicting him to Alabama. But he finally decided to go ahead and pull that trigger yesterday, and Alabama gets its tight end in this class, and I think they're completely finished at the tight end position.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because obviously you recruit more than one player at a position, but Alabama wanted a tight end with Forrestall and Tucker Jr. both exhausting their eligibility after this season. This seems to me, from the outside looking in, this situation with Alts, he seems to be their number one target. I know they had other guys they were recruiting. Is that a fair statement, that Alts was the guy that they had made their priority, or did they have a number of guys and they were going to take the first one that committed? How does that work, Bone?
Well, I think when you look at all the tight ends throughout the country, there were probably some guys out there that they liked a lot. They probably would have taken commitments from early on in the spring, but at the same time, it became a guy that they really liked. In the spring, they extended him an offer. And, not a lot of people knew about him. He was one of those unknowns that a lot of people were kind of waiting to see him during the spring, during the summer, and just didn't get that opportunity to see him. But Alabama evaluated his film. He really rose up in on their recruiting board and became a priority target for them. And there were certainly some other high profile guys out there that were on Alabama's recruiting board. But I would say he was at least probably one of Alabama's top 3 tight end targets. Somebody that they really liked a lot, and somebody that they are very excited about having as part of their recruiting class right now. There was some guys who made some early decisions. Jermaine Terry from California, who committed to Cal, decided to stay home. Elijah Arroyo from Texas, who actually is originally from Miami and committed to Miami. Those were a couple of guys that they really liked. I know Hudson Wolf, as we've talked about before, decided to stay home and committed to Tennessee. But Robbie is certainly a guy that they liked a lot and considered amongst those guys in terms of who were their top overall targets.
You mentioned the evaluation process, and I want to go in depth on this. And I had used, and there are many examples. Clearly, the top high school players usually make the top college players. Top college players usually make the top NFL players, so forth and so on. But if you recruit strictly off recruiting lists, you're going to have some misses. And I'd used Ryan Kelly as an example, now the highest paid center in the NFL, when Alabama recruited him out of Ohio. Similar to, well, I've been calling him Outs, but you say Oots, Robbie Oots, in that.
It might be Outs.
Yeah, well, either way. But in relation to the fact that this was a prospect that Alabama evaluated, decided they liked him, didn't worry about where he was rated, and that's the beauty of Nick Saban. I mean, most of the time, the guys that he recruits are going to be highly rated players, but if he likes a player or the staff likes a player and they're convinced that he can play, they don't wait for somebody else to give their seal of approval, do they? They make the offer, and they go with their own gut instinct and their own evaluation.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, everybody's not going to be a 5-star. Everybody's not going to be a 4-star. There's going to be a lot of 3-stars that are out there. And there's a lot of 3-stars that are making a lot of money in the NFL right now. And, there's a lot more 3-stars out there than there are, 5 and 4-star recruits. So, this is a guy that, like I said, not a lot of people have had an opportunity to see. But if you watch his film, it's very impressive. He's not going to blow you away with his speed, but he'll go up and get the ball. He's a great pass catcher, and one of the most physical blockers that you'll find anywhere in the country.
When you look at Alex in terms of his athletic ability, and the basketball parallel seems to be something with tight ends, man. But it just shows you the athleticism needed to be a good basketball player really relates well to the tight end position in football, it seems to me, Bone.
Yeah, absolutely. Hand-eye coordination, the physicality, his just athleticism overall. It's very impressive. It also keeps him in pretty good shape. He's not just taking a break before spring practice begins again, or just working out. He's staying in shape. Always running and just keeping his body intact. So he's definitely a guy that is a tremendous athlete. I mean, you watch his highlight film. On the basketball court. I mean, he'll get up and slam dunk some basketballs, and it's pretty impressive. And we've talked about all these other Alabama targets this year who are also star basketball players: Quincy McKinstry, Tyrion Arnold, Xavier Sorey, and now you have Robbie Oots, who's a multi-sport athlete who's just a tremendous addition to this football class.
Andrew Bone with us from BamaInsider.com for the Bama Football Recruiting Report here on the Gary Harris Show. Alabama now with 21 commitments. All these guys seem pretty firm. We discussed this last week, but numbers are starting to get tight now. And in terms of how many more guys Alabama can sign, every week I put you on commitment watch, and you've just been dead on this year with me. But who are a couple guys that are out there that you feel like will eventually pull the trigger for Alabama and might do so rather soon?
I think with Alabama right now having 21 commitments, I think one of the main focuses that a lot of people don't pay much attention to is hanging on to your commitments. You got to make sure that all those guys are happy. You got to make sure that all of them are treated as if they're not committed, because other programs are still heavily recruiting them. Other programs are trying to flip them, so you got to make sure all those guys are happy and want to be a part of this recruiting class, which I believe they are. I know other schools are trying to flip some of these guys, but I think for the most part, all of them are very solid with their commitments. In terms of guys who may be close to making a decision, I just don't see anybody making a decision for Alabama in the next couple months. I think the majority of Alabama's remaining targets are going to wait, and there's not a lot of guys out there. As we mentioned, I think there's probably 5 spots remaining. And you look at the offensive side of the ball, only a couple targets out there. Alabama's trying to get another wide receiver. Brian Thomas out of Louisiana, certainly a priority target. Well, he's not expected to make a commitment anytime soon. On the defensive side of the ball, a lot of defensive ends out there that Alabama is still heavily pursuing. All those guys plan on waiting until the end. Xavier Sorey at the linebacker position plans on waiting until he can potentially take some more visits before making a decision. And then defensive back wise, kind of similar situation. Tyrion Arnold is going to wait until potentially signing day. A couple guys who are going to be making decisions relatively soon. Amarius Mims, the 5-star offensive tackle from Georgia. Now, I do think as of right now, it's more of a Georgia-Tennessee recruiting battle.
Right.
Alabama does have 4 outstanding offensive line commitments. I think they could potentially be finished at the offensive line position. I think they'll wait and kind of see what happens with Amarius Mims and then make a decision if they're going to press forward on somebody else. But as of right now, just kind of waiting to see what happens with Mims, and then with Quincy McKinstry, as we've talked about many times. And I think that's probably the question you ask me every single week on the show. What's going to happen with Kool-Aid? And as of right now, I still kind of feel like he's going to end up going to Auburn. That's my prediction. I know LSU's strongly in it. Alabama's still strongly in it. All those schools are still communicating with him, every single week and trying to get him on board. But just from talking to different people, it seems like Auburn is in the driver's seat for him at this time. So those are 2 guys who are probably going to make decisions. Mims obviously currently set to make a decision on October the 14th, but I do think Kool-Aid makes a decision relatively soon as well. But as far as every other target that's out there for Alabama, I think most of those guys are going to wait until after their senior season is completed.
You mentioned the great offensive line class and work that's already been done. Is it at this point now, is it Mims or bust as far as another offensive tackle in this class, or do you think Alabama could still take another offensive tackle if Mims goes to Georgia or to Tennessee?
Yeah, it's possible. Obviously with very, very few spots remaining in this class, and some very important positions that still remain. With defensive line, defensive back. Still trying to get another wide receiver. Trying to decide what Xavier Sori is going to do. I think it's going to be tough for Alabama to take another offensive lineman. But there's still some guys out there besides Mims that they're still reaching out to, still communicating with. Eric Cade from Texas. Wyatt Millam, who is from West Virginia, is committed to West Virginia. Those are a couple guys that Alabama's still keeping tabs on, still recruiting. So I think once Mims makes that decision on the 14th next month, Alabama will try to make a final decision on if they're going to take another lineman or not.
Andrew, I want to ask you specifically about a guy that I think you have felt strongly will wind up at Alabama. If I'm wrong, correct me, but. That's the outstanding defensive end out of Texas, Shamar Turner. Is that your feeling, and when do you think something will happen with him?
Yeah, if he were to make a decision today, I think Alabama would be the choice. Just from talking to different sources, in Tuscaloosa, out in Texas, I think a lot of people feel pretty good about Alabama's chances to land him, but. The problem is he's not announcing a decision today. He's going to be announcing a decision, probably in 3 or 4 months. So where is he going to be in 3 or 4 months in terms of will he be able to take visits elsewhere? Now he did visit. He took an unofficial visit, over to Texas a couple weekends ago. Is he going to be able to get back to Texas? Is he going to get over to Texas A&M? What about a return trip to Tuscaloosa? Those are kind of the 3 schools out in the front right now. Now, LSU, Georgia, trailing those schools right now, but he wants to visit those programs, and those are in his top 5, and hasn't visited them yet. So we'll see if he ends up making trips to those places. But I do like Alabama's chances at this time. I do think Alabama gets, I think they at least get one more defensive end, but I think they really want to try to get 2 more defensive ends in this class, and I think they've got a chance to do that. There's a lot of guys who are out there. It's not just Shamar Turner. You got JT Tuamola from just outside of Seattle. Tamise Adelie, who's also from the state of Texas. Chambry Jackson from Orlando. Alabama's still recruiting Corey Foreman, the number 1 player in the country out of California. But I think he's probably a bit of a long shot at this point. But those are some of the top guys at the defensive end position who are strongly still considering Alabama.
Let me ask you about a couple more players specifically before we wrap it up. The defensive back, Tyrion Arnold, what's the latest on him?
Well, he put out a top 11 about 2 weeks ago. Tyrion Arnold, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated prospects in the entire country. 6'1", about 190 pounds. Can play corner, can play safety. A lot of schools are recruiting him different positions. Georgia mentioned to him they were recruiting him as more as a safety and more as a free safety. Alabama is recruiting him more as a corner. And he's recently said that he kind of prefers playing corner. That's his favorite position. He feels more natural at safety, but likes corner the most. And Alabama's been at or near the top of his list ever since they offered him last year. And even though he has the top 11, I think it really comes down to 3 schools. And he said this earlier this week. These are the 3 schools that kind of have his attention the most right now, and that's Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Now, he's visited Alabama a couple times, just visited Georgia a couple weekends ago for the first time. Now, once again, didn't have an opportunity to, really go inside the facilities and see everything or visit with the coaching staff. But, and with Florida, Florida has several defensive back commitments. I think they have 6 defensive back commitments right now, but still pressing to get Tyrion Arnold on board, so he remains a priority. And with Alabama, obviously he's been a top priority target since day one. So 3-team race, in my opinion, for him, and probably not going to, we're probably not going to see a decision from him anytime soon. Probably going to be, a little bit closer to signing day.
And lastly, here on the local scene in Tuscaloosa, Kamari Lassiter, American Christian's two-way player who projects probably as a cornerback in college, is off to a great start this season. You said in the past, you know, he's a terrific player. You just don't think that he's going to wind up at Alabama. Alabama has some other options there and some other commitments. But anything happening with him and UA at this point?
Not right now. I mean, I think Alabama's still, interested. They're still kind of keeping tabs on him, still watching him. Obviously, being a local kid, they really like him, and certainly, I think that if they had room, would probably try to fit him in. But as of right now, I think you gotta wait and see what happens with guys like Tyrion Arnold, Jordan Gilbert out of Louisiana, and Sage Ryan also out of Louisiana. Some guys have been very high on their recruiting board for a long time, and they consider top priorities right now. So I do think with Alabama's defensive back class, they have 4 defensive backs committed right now. And, I think they certainly want to get 5 now. If they can get 2 more guys that they really want, if they can get 2 out of those 3, or potentially get Kool-Aid, they would certainly take 2. But I think they're going to end up signing probably only 5 defensive backs in this class.
Great stuff as always, Bone, and a lot more information like that available at BamaInsider.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can go back and watch our recruiting show from last night. Just go to YouTube, search Bama Insider, and watch our live recruiting show from last night. You can follow us at BamaInsider.com, which is part of the Rivals.com network. And you can follow me on my Twitter handle at Andrew, the letter J, Bone. And also, you can purchase my first book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Books A Million. Just go on there. It's available for pre-sale, The Road to Bama.
By the way, Bone, I was sent a copy of that. Thanks to you and your publisher so much. I can't wait to read it.
Absolutely, Gary. I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully we can talk about it a little bit more in the next few weeks once it gets released.
Absolutely, we'll do it. Thanks, buddy.
All right, Gary. See ya. Bye.